Hey guys, so what does the 2017 UK property market hold? I'm Alegre-Wood and this is Property Investment Update. So I guess the real thing here is there is so much stuff that's positive and negative, and actually a lot of it's not getting out in the media. I mean, it's interesting. I'm watching things that are on the media. I'm listening to what investors are saying, and the reality is, and I'm speaking to developers as well, and what I'm finding is that there's such a broad range of opinions. Now, obviously, there's lots of things to talk about. You know, we can talk about the FTSE, we can talk about the economy in general, we can talk about Brexit, we can talk about, Europe, we can talk about the whole world, we can talk about Trump. There's so many things that, are what I call the white noise, okay? So what I'm hoping to do with this video, and what I'm certainly going to do with this video, is strip back all the rubbish and garbage and just get down to the real facts, I guess, as I see them as a property investor in the UK. So let's just start. The big thing, Brexit. So obviously we've just triggered Article 50. Great news for those that supported Brexit. Not so great news for those that didn't. Look, whether you agree with it or not, it's happened. Okay, so in 2 years' time, we're exiting the EU. I don't think there's really much you can do about it apart from to see where the negotiations is. It's going to be an interesting ride. But I think fundamentally, it's business as usual right now. In fact, the market has already factored in everything to Brexit being announced. They knew it was coming. So actually, when you don't surprise the market, it's able to respond fairly quickly. Business as usual. The real thing that is affecting the property market right now, in my feel, is the government and in particular tax changes. So the government in terms of the incentives they're giving, okay? And look, I mean, it's interesting because when we look at some of these sort of articles here, this is just one article and there's many, many of them. For most of the country, Brexit will have little effect on house prices. In much of the UK, home buyers are moving because they need to, because of the jobs that are expanding family. This means that prices will hold up for most of those areas, okay? While demand remains high and there aren't enough houses being built to match it, the value of the property will keep rising in most areas, albeit at a slower rate for the last few years. And really, for me, that pretty much sums up what I would say is what's happening in the market. I don't think there's going to be this massive drop. And here's one of the key things and the reasons why, despite what anyone will tell you, is that prices haven't really grown outside the London, sort of central London, M25, and commuter towns. They haven't really grown massively. Now, you can say Manchester's had some growth, Liverpool's had some growth, and some areas have grown, but not massively. And even the Manchesters, a lot of the stuff you're seeing where house price growth has happened has been in the new build sector, in building new places, not in the secondary market. So once the secondary market picks up, then you'll start to see some really good growth. And I think, to be fair, we've had a decade of nothing much happening. And we've had the Help to Buy scheme, which is another government incentive. That's been great for people to get on the ladder. But government's also pushing for big business to build more properties and to build them to rent, okay? It's called PRS, but basically it's private rented accommodation that the company or the developer will hold on to effectively and manage and rent out. So pushing more and more people into not owning their own home. So moving on, look, property market. I want to show you this because I talk about the ripple effect all the time. And, London, we can say, well, hold on. London Central, house prices have dropped. They're dropping still. What's happening there? And the reality is, yes, they have. But the reason they've dropped is because an outside force, government, has changed the tax regime, which has meant it's infinitesimally more expensive to buy in that area. It's subdued the area. A lot of international lenders aren't in there. So a lot of the transaction volumes are way down. And a lot of those transaction volumes are cash, okay? I read somewhere 70% of those transactions in the sort of central London were cash, which is incredible, okay? But that's, at that end. And realistically, is that the market you and I in? No, okay? So it doesn't really astound. But the interesting thing is that is where the fundamentals ripple out from. Now, I want to show you this. This is a great example of, annual house price changes in London Borough in 2017. Now, if you have a look here, what you've got here is this blue is where house prices have been dropping, red house prices. But then if you look around here, house prices have grown. Does that look like a ripple effect to you? And if it does, well, that's exactly what it is. And the amazing thing is that actually that ripple effect is rippling out. There is no doubt about it. And if you go out further to the commuter towns, you'll see that that's exactly the same things happening. So ripple effect is working exactly how it should. Now, interestingly, I want to show you this because this is an article. London is hit by a reverse ripple effect as prices in the cheapest boroughs rise faster than... Now, interestingly, this is a little bit misleading because yes, it is, okay? The government changes affected all areas in London pretty much, but in particular, the higher end of things. And so therefore, this is what they're talking about, the reverse ripple effect. To be fair, ignore it if people are telling you this. I still think London Zone 1 and 2 will astound. And, if we take a look at the areas, so let's have a look at the specific areas that we talk about, which is, if we talk about a ripple effect Pentagon, if you're not sure what that is, jump online and have a look at it. But basically, it's where we source and the strategy we use to source property. Now, right now, London Zone 1 and 2, we're not really sourcing there, okay? It's subdued, but it's not dead by any means. And I think London will always astound. And I think what's going to happen is everyone's talking London down. And while they're talking it down, all of a sudden, house prices are going to turn around that area. Demand's going to be back up. People are already pricing in the stamp duty changes, the tax changes, all these type of things. And once that happens, and once the ripple effect comes out, that will keep going back up. All right. Now, interestingly, so London 3, 4, and 5. Okay. In this case, you've really got to pick your areas because London 4, 3, 4, 5, zones 3, 4, 5. You've got to pick your areas. Some areas, are baking and probably overbaked a bit. But the reality is there's still really good fundamentals. There's huge amounts of regeneration. And if you look for that regeneration, that's where you're going to see the house price growth. Often it's in the areas that need the most regeneration. The great thing is regeneration, change in fundamentals. As the fundamentals get better, the price gets better. And see, these are some of the areas that we're targeting specifically, and we have done. It's what I'm an expert in, and what I'm very much my team and I are looking for those areas where there's lots of money, lots of change in fundamentals happening. Let's look at commuter towns because commuter towns is another interesting one. Again, these are hot. There's lots happening. There's lots of potential still because what you find is the major areas they've grown considerably, but some of those areas now have their own ripple effects out from them. And they're the areas that we really want to look into. I mean, we've just done a deal in Leatherhead. Now, I would never have talked about Leatherhead before, but there's a major regeneration happening. It's a great area and a classic example of an area where hasn't really seen huge price growth yet, but will be coming. And there's huge amounts of areas. So, if you have a look at this sort of list, there's a whole list of places there of commuter towns, that are ripe for the pickings, okay? And, you can pick out anyone. So look, not all of them are equal. So don't just think because they're on that list that they are the best places. Swanley, some of these calculations, the way they calculate their numbers, for me, they look and they go, well, this is the cheapest, the best yield. That's how they calculate. You got to look at how they calculate this. It may not suit your investment strategy. And to be fair, there's some of those places where I go, you know what, the prices are already too expensive. There's not much room for growth. We probably missed the boat on those places. There's other places I look in there and go, that's where I'm targeting. So you've still got to do your research. You've still got to get in there and see what's been happening in the area. By the time a news article comes out, it's probably too late for that area, okay? So commuter towns, great area. If you can focus and get in there, excellent, fantastic, all right? Let's look at major cities, because major cities, for a long time, all we've heard about is Manchester, 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 and more recent, a little bit of Liverpool, okay? For me, I can't help but think that Manchester's baking and in some areas baked, okay? And what I mean by that is the house price growth has been quite large. And if we're talking new build now, because let's talk new build for a second. New build, I think some of those prices are getting way up. Do I think they're going to drop down? No, not necessarily. But I think what has to happen is a secondary market now has to activate and pick up. I think Liverpool, I'm a lot more skeptical about Liverpool. I think Liverpool, really, there's so many units going on. When you go to Liverpool and see just how many cranes are in the sky and how much is happening, I'm not sure that Liverpool can cope with that much development. That's my concern. But then you've got Birmingham, Leeds, Wolverhampton, Sheffield, Nottingham, and all these sort of other cities, and I define them as major cities with universities. Those sort of places, fantastic. Local market, doing really well. Sales are being made. House prices aren't really going and galloping up yet, but I'll tell you, that will happen, okay? That will follow on. Let's go major towns is the next area we look at. Now, really, for me, I think these are the next to go. But I think really, right now, even the smallest towns, the smallest towns are starting to look better. The local market is activated, it's working, transaction numbers are low, house prices aren't really growing. As an investor not living in those local areas, I'd probably say, not yet, okay? Maybe hold off. Now look, if there's massive regeneration or change in fundamentals, things like that you can visibly see are going to happen and are funded, okay? So not just approved, but actually funded, then yeah, by all means, But for me, I'm not yet into the major towns yet. We're still sticking to the major cities with universities, and perhaps the surrounding areas of those. Because I think they will come. The local markets are good. Everywhere I'm speaking to and everyone I'm speaking to, all the sourcing guys, they're saying things are moving. Developers are selling, but they're selling to the local market. And for international investors, unfortunately, you're ruled out of this because most of the house prices are still under 100 grand. You can't get mortgages on them. It's not going to happen. Now, interestingly, and I just want to show you this. This is an article from Australia. Huge commission to Chinese agents driving unit sales. Now, it's interesting. This is an Australian thing, and they're talking about offered 8% upfront commissions. That's happening in the UK right now, and has been happening, where you've got these Asian, Chinese in particular, agents wanting 8% commission, which is a huge commission. All that, and forget the agents, the Chinese agents, the 8% or anything like that. The important thing is, the reason that the Chinese agents are struggling with this 8%, getting this 8% now, is because developers are able to sell their stock to their local marketplace. That's good for us, because that means the whole market's starting to activate and move. And as that happens, and as that spreads out through the whole UK, good news for everyone. House prices get back to normalizing, if you like, okay? So let's talk about different strategies, because what we've got, and one of the things we've started doing is these hotel rooms. So, I've written lots of articles, I've done videos on it, because one of the things we've been doing, and I've been looking at different ways to make money. For very many years, we did residential property, and that was it, new build residential. We're now going to Australian property, we're now doing Spanish property, we're now, doing hotel rooms. And so there's a whole broad range of aspects, because I think now we've had to become a bit creative. Mortgages, it's not as easy to build a portfolio just by doing residential property. So in the future, you're now going to have to consider doing, students and, HMOs and all these other alternative strategies, which maybe before you didn't want to. And I'm not saying do these, because if you're going to do them, you've got to do them the way that I always talk about, which is have a core strategy, which is your main strategy, residential property, let's say. Then you might have one other, which might be a hotel room. It may be another country. It could be Aussie property. It could be Spanish property. So that sort of gives you a bit of a round sort of look at what's happening. Look, there's for me what do I think about 2007? Look, 2007, zone 1 and 2, subdued but still very good long term. Don't ever knock London, because actually it is still a world city. It's still one of the best markets. Even with all these changes. 3, 4, 5. Pick your areas. Commuter towns, pick your areas, but very good and hot right now. And that's where I recommend, if you don't know where to go, look to your commuter towns. Major cities, absolutely. Universities, the important thing there is Manchester, Liverpool. Be a little bit skeptical. Make sure you do additional research. Other major cities still haven't grown, so they're the places you should be looking, and keeping your ear out for now. Major towns, certainly, I think not quite yet, but I think it will come. It may be next year, depending on how the whole Brexit negotiation goes. But I really don't think Brexit's going to affect house prices in those areas. I think Brexit's going to largely be a null and void effect, if I'm truthful. Overall, and just coming to a bit of a summary here, building supply continues its upward trend. There's more properties being built, which is great news. The problem is a large proportion of those are going to what we call PRS, or build to rent, where the developer takes over. Wembley is a great example of this. There was something like 15,000 apartments that were going to be built. Now they're going to be built to be rented. You won't get a chance to buy them, okay? We moved to Wembley because we thought, here's this lovely pipeline of property for the next 10 or 15 years. The reality is we're moving away from Wembley at the end of the year, because there's nothing else to sell there, because everything in Wembley now will be built in order to rent it via Quintain or TP they call them. But look, overall it's a great year. There's lots of positive happening, and I don't think the headwinds like Brexit and Trump's and all these sort of things are really going to weigh down the market enough to see house prices drop dramatically. I think if you can get in and get in with a strategy and know the rules of the game and all those things we talk about, then definitely do it. All right, guys, have a great day. Live with passion.